Hi, English 9 and English 9 Honors. These are the short, quick notes on how to complete your short story universal theme paper outline. The other day in class for homework, you completed your brainstorm sheet where you picked two other works to discuss in this paper, as well as the short story you were going to be analyzing as well. These were the notes that we talked about in class the other day, but just in case you need a little more practice, you can check out what I'm going to kind of go through today. So remember, as you go to complete this outline, you should not be using complete sentences. You want to make sure that you're shortening things, really that you're trying to the best of your ability to do this, develop your ideas, but without going in depth. That's when you actually go to write your paper and draft your paper is when you'll actually give me the details and a little bit more development. But for this case, we want to make sure that we can use bullets, that we use shorthand, that we do things to really just get out our ideas rather than expanding on them. There's, remember, 4 paragraphs to our essay. The first paragraph is our introduction paragraph, which we're going to talk about in a second. Our second paragraph is our first body paragraph, which is related to the theme's appearance in the short story. And thirdly is our body paragraph number 2, where we're going to discuss the other 2 works that you brainstormed the other night, the other external works like a movie or a short story or a song or a novel, something that else that outside of our class that shows the same theme as the short story that you're choosing to analyze. And last but not least, our conclusion paragraph. So you are welcome to use some of my notes to help you to complete this. Some of the things you might be able to use word for word. Otherwise, you want to make sure that you're coming up with your own ideas. All right, for our introduction paragraph, we're going to start first and foremost with our topic sentence. When we talked about this the other day, we said we're going to start off our paper by introducing the story it is that we're writing about. For the one that we're going to use today, my sample paper is on the Osage orange tree. Should not be italicized because remember our short stories always go in quotes. So the Osage orange tree is the title of my story, and it's by William Stafford. For our topic sentence, we would actually go and make this a sentence when we actually draft our paper, but for the sake of today, we are simply just going to type out the title and the author. Then we are going to give a short, quick little summary of the story. So this story, we want to give the general gist. We don't want to give the entire long, lengthy layout of the story. We just want to hit the major points. Again, 3 to 5 bullet points, and we want to make sure that we're summarizing the story in relation to its theme. So if I want to fill in my thesis statement really quick before I do that, I want to make sure that I talk about the theme, which my sample one was, the universal theme in poverty, times are tough, is displayed in the short story, The Osage Orange Tree, as well as and I brainstormed 2 other works that also displayed this theme, the movie, and because movies are italicized, I'm going to change that, the movie, The Pursuit of Happiness, and another movie, which I'm going to make red, the movie 8 Mile. Okay, so now that I have my theme, I can start summarizing the Osage Orange Tree in relation to this theme. So I want to talk about the fact that we had our main characters, Evangeline and the narrator. They developed a friendship outside of school. We know that she stole her graduation money to buy newspapers to see the narrator. And because my theme has to deal with poverty and times being tough when she's living in poverty, I'm going to mention the fact that Evangeline was really living in a situation that showed poverty. And so I could say she was living in tough times because of the Dust Bowl, and she had to steal rather than use other money because she wanted a friend. She made the extreme sacrifice. Okay. That if I'm giving a short little summary, I'm going to kind of just hit up some major points of what happened. Next, we want to make sure that we have this transition. okay? Because we're not just talking about the short story in this paper. We're talking about the theme being present in the short story, but we're also talking about how the theme doesn't just show up in short stories, but how it is also a universal theme, meaning it applies in many different places. And because we talk about the universal theme being not only in our story, but also in other places in our thesis statement, we need to have some phrase that transitions. You can use a form of this in your paper if you like. Really, what we're going to say, we're going to have a sentence that says theme does not just show up in this story. It also appears in other works or other forms of literature, something along those lines that's going to help us transition into our thesis statement. So for our introduction, topic sentence introducing our story, short little summary in relation to its theme, a transitional statement that talks about theme not only existing in this story, but also showing up in other places as a universal theme, and therefore we're going to move into our thesis statement. Remember, you can get your thesis statement right off your brainstorm sheet. You want to make sure, though, that you put your other works in order of how you want to discuss them in your paper, because remember, your thesis statement is your roadmap. All right, let's go on to body paragraph number 1, which is paragraph number 2. Remember, this is the one about the short story. We want to talk about our examples of how the theme is in the short story. Remember, we did our color coding in class, so if you haven't done so, you want to make sure we're going to have 2 examples from the short story. We're going to have one example from the story that supports the theme, and then we're also going to have a second example. I'm going to color code these because we did this in class, and that way we'll know these green things all go with one example, and the pink things all go with a second example. So with this paragraph, you're going to pull out 2 examples from the short story that support this theme. Where are 2 things that happened in the story, or 2 elements that are key to the story that show me that this theme is there? We obviously got this message from this author, and we need to know how we got that message. What did we see happen in the story or through the characters in the story that told us that this theme exists? For our outlines, we do not have to outline our topic sentences, our transitions, or conclusions. You will write them when you get into the actual writing and drafting of your paper. So my theme, remember checking back to my thesis statement, is that in poverty times are tough. So I want to come up with an example of where that was seen in the story. One of the examples that we saw, we want to give some background for. So I'm going to tell right here in this box, I'm going to answer what was the background for this quote that we're going to pull in a second, meaning what is the example? What happened in the story? Give me like 2 to 3 sentences or 2 to 3 ideas about what's happening here. One of the major things that we saw in the story was Evangeline's house. It was gray, it was slanted, it did not look nice to live in. We know that she definitely, her house was very much a personification of her living state. And because of that, I'm going to give a little summary, a little bit of background of what happened. If you're using an example from the lottery, you need to support and tell me something that happened in the lottery that tells me this was an outdated tradition and it should be stopped. If you're using an example from the Masque of the Red Death, you need to make sure that you are finding an example in the story that tells us that no one can escape death. Who in particular didn't? Why? Or you can give me an example of how they were trying to and it didn't work out. If you're writing about the Osage Orange Tree with the actual theme that you can use, that's people going to an extreme measure for friendship. You want to make sure that you bring out an example of where this occurred. Where do we see someone going to an extreme measure for friendship? There's a couple different things that you could do and kind of go through and explain. So you're going to give me a quick little background. When did this occur in the story? What happened? What was going on? What is the example that it is that you're talking about? Then you want to make sure that you pull out a quote. You want to find something that was said in the text that fits with this particular quote, with this particular example. Sometimes you might not find one directly stated. However, you can find a quote that relates to it and would be able to show it through your analysis. So as we pull out a quote, I gave you a couple directions up here you want to make sure, as we're getting in the habit of doing MLA format, that you quote your elements from a story, but you also give it a citation. When we're doing MLA format, you want to make sure that you give a citation that is the author's last name and the page number from which the quote comes. So I'm going to pretend that I have my quote. This is my quote that I got from the story. Then I'm going to give a parentheses. This story was written by William Stafford, so I'm going to put the last name. I'm going to pretend it's in page 2, and then end parentheses and period. I don't put a P, I don't put PG, I don't write out page. I literally just put the author and just the page number, nothing else in between. And that's how I would cite. Then, last but not least, this is the biggest part of your paper, is the explanation. You can tell me all you want that Miss Strangeworth writing a mean letter shows that she was not what it seemed. You can say that. However, you haven't explained it to me. What you need to be able to do is explain how this example that you wrote right here, how this example goes back to your theme. We always want to directly link our examples to the analysis that we're performing. Why does this example show us this theme? And that's what you want to answer right here. You could do it along the lines, the example shows the theme here because Evangeline's house, the fact that it was worn down, it doesn't really show, or it does show that she's living in a really bad state, that she obviously, the appearance of the house reflects that she wasn't living in the best conditions, and because of that she had to struggle to survive. And a good way to bring in the theme is to make sure to bring in elements of the theme. So my theme was that times were tough. I might want to mention that times were tough for Evangeline and give some sort of explanation directly linking my theme back to my thesis statement. Okay, directly linking my example back to that thesis statement and to the theme. Then I'm going to do, after I've given my first example from the story, I need to do the exact same thing to the second one. I'm going to find another example in the story where this occurred. Again, 2 to 3 sentences explaining what happened in the story, what's your little background. You're going to find me a quote. You're going to give me some information about that quote. Pull out the quote, end parentheses, author's last name, page number, end parentheses, period. And then again, how does this example show the theme? Explain it to me. Answer that. How do we see whatever happened in this particular element of the story? How does that connect back to what it is you're trying to say? Like, you're trying to tell me that this theme exists in the story. How? How do I know that? Explain it to me. And that's what we're going to do with our first body paragraph. We are going to explain and analyze the theme being present in the short story that is first listed in your thesis statement. Mine was the Osage orange tree. Now, the third body paragraph, and I'll delete some of this.